Hey fellas, let's talk about Kasumi. So, I've been playing Paladins for nearly 6 years at this point, and if I picked up anything about this game, it's that it's had its fair share of hated characters. That hatred mostly stemming from how powerful and unbalanced a character might be. Hated characters generally fall into two categories in my head. Characters who become absurdly powerful due to balance changes or general meta changes, think Grok with his crazy AoE damage, Xin with his wacky stalling, Cassie with just breathe, Kinessa and Strix with their insane sniping damage at different points in time, Leon for being really good at Leon things, and so on. And then of course there's characters that are released in quite overpowered and broken states. Think Maeve removing all CC and damage over time with a single hit of her Q, Vivian with her brain dead and equally brain melting damage, Khan with his mass CC ignoring Q, Dredge with his damage, and of course there are others. Pretty much anyone released in the past year or so would probably fit pretty soundly into that format. And then there's Kasumi. Kasumi is the most hated character the Paladins community has ever had the pleasure of dealing with. Being released in a similarly overpowered state as many other characters, it's not a particular surprise that she's picked up some rather rabid enemies in the community, though something about Kasumi has always hit a little different than most, as her dominance on the battlefield is only matched and surpassed by her controversial existence outside the game itself, living rent-free in almost every modern Paladins player's mind to date. So why the hell is that anyway? What makes this ghostly gal so different than other broken-ass release characters? Well, if I had to guess, it all comes down to the abilities, obviously. You see, overpowered aspects of a character are most often attached to a single ability on cooldown. For instance, Xin's counter, which the duration of could be changed depending on cards Xin was running, was a powerful stalling tool on a powerful kit, but the ability itself is on a 7-second cooldown. Once counter is over, it's over and can be taken advantage of, even if by definition it's a very useful ability. Same thing with Maeve. If her 9 lives was already used, it would be a solid 20 seconds before she can escape any crowd control again. Leon's presence, although reducible with cards, is 15 seconds. Furia's Solar Blessing Pyre Strike is 12 seconds, Khan's Battle Shout was 15 seconds, and so on. More often than not, the ability will seem unbearably broken for a moment, but if contested properly can be avoided and the character can be dealt with. Kasumi is a little different. Her most frustrating ability is her busted and auto-aim primary fire, and how it interacts with her other abilities. As a result, there is never a feeling of relief when this character is alive, for the ability to be contested and for the character to be dealt with are one and the same. Auto-aim abilities in general create a pretty interesting dynamic when it comes to FPSs, but the most common result is a hell of a lot of frustration. Lex's In Pursuit, Leon's Valor, to some extent Grok's and Androx's alternate fires, and even auto-aim heals had all had their time in the spotlight, as all have been egregiously powerful or egregiously spammable at one point or another, showing just how difficult it is to balance these auto-aim abilities, fringing between not feeling lackluster to use, but not overly frustrating to have it used on. Kasumi's primary is widely thought to be the most offending of them all, being already kind of powerful as well as lacking any sort of reload, making it spammable as can be. Logically, reloading a doll wouldn't make a lot of sense, but if multiple swords, wands, staffs, chakrams, whatever, need to be reloaded, this does seem more like an intentional feature than not. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Every hit of her primary builds up these wacky curse stacks, which all serve to empower her other abilities and her primary itself. For each stack, the victim does reduced damage and takes 20% more damage from both Kasumi's primary and alternate fire. In short, more stacks equals good, and when the opponent these stacks are built on is killed, these stacks are then lost. If they are not killed, the stacks can quickly be swapped to another victim twice as fast. Not to mention her primary fire just does straight up double damage to deployables and shields, because she needs it. Her alternate fire plays as an extension of her primary, having a cooldown and doing exponentially more damage the more stacks the victim has. If the victim has the maximum of 5 stacks on them, they will be completely disarmed for 1 second, a unique state preventing a character's primary from being used, because, you know, she needs it. That is, if they're not already dead from the 1,000 damage they just swallowed. The rest of her abilities, although not broken, they add to this strange aura of annoyance that Kasumi carries. Her third ability is a wacky jump scare button. She puts down this fancy doll here, and if anyone steps generally around it, Kasumi is alerted and can teleport to where the doll is placed, potentially fearing and applying curse stacks to all enemies in an area around the doll. Wacky. Although less useful in practice than it sounded to me at first, the annoyance of this ability is self-evident. Her main mobility ability allows her to disappear from existence essentially, leaving her body behind to sponge some damage while she hops the heck out of there. If her body dies, she dies, but if her body lives, she basically disappears without a trace. Again, although not the greatest mobility ability, its annoyance is self-evident. Her ultimate just kind of turns you into an explosion, and an infectious one of that. It does buttloads of damage and shoots out these weird little dart things in a flat radius around the target. As usual, it slaps a bunch of those curse stacks on everyone, but the most annoying thing about it is how it's used. It auto-aims, so just kind of press E or whatever button your ultimate is, and chaos ensues. Most infuriatingly, if the Kasumi is about to die in a 1v1, something easy to tell by the telegraphed way she does damage, she can just pop this ult on you before she dies, likely killing you, cutting short your hard-fought victory, and making her an appropriately lore-suited revenge killer of sorts. Kasumi herself is little more than a damage turret, able to dish out wacky amounts of effects constantly with only small things keeping her in check. Although technically having 2 abilities acting as mobility, she is very immobile, similar to characters like Vivian preferring to keep herself alive by raw damage instead. Use of her F mostly entails she's put herself in a bad spot, and although it can be used in a pinch out of combat, in combat she would likely end up dying in the process of its use anyway, even though there are cards to mitigate this possibility. And I'll be real, I don't really know how to use her Q. It can kind of be used to cover flank option, but its usage tends to be pretty niche and inconsistent. But I'm not the best Kasumi player, so you know, what the hell do I know? Back to her primary again, the main balancing choice with her primary is obviously to heavily reduce the range as compared to most damage champions out there. Only be able to reach about this much, creating a very strict bubble of where Kasumi is effective. Of course, this bubble has the lovely effect of seeming way too big for anyone playing against Kasumi. Meanwhile, the Kasumi itself feels like it's impossible to hit anyone merely across the point while staying safe, which honestly, depending on the situation of the game, both are equally valid thoughts. Thus are the woes of balance. In any case, unlike traditional damages, this renders Kasumi completely useless when enemies are outside of this bubble, but allows what feels like 100% consistency when they are within that range. This forgiving and currently very rewarding playstyle of hers causes her to be very easy to pick up. With a telegraphed and simple playstyle, even the most bronze of bronze 5 can understand. But due to the equally extremely predictable nature of the character, the skill cap for her is very low. As a result, a Kasumi, yes, any Kasumi, has the potential to make you shudder on the loading screen, whether level 5, 10, 15, or 100. On the flip side, that also entails that it is very hard to push the character further. Whether Kasumi is overpowered or not, a Kasumi will still 9 times out of 10 have its shit kicked in by another player piloting a higher skill cap champion, whether the Kasumi is experienced or not. In other words, she is the ultimate skill test, or even a gatekeeping character if you want to look at it that way. Regardless, her dominance in casual play is prevalent and inescapable. Her damage makes her a menace, her generally frustrating abilities make her a pain, and her telegraphed playstyle gives the strongest impression of a brain-dead imbecilic champion that we, as Paladins players, haven't garnered in years. There's nothing quite like that feeling of being caught off guard in her bubble, knowing you can't expect her to miss, knowing your mobility and damage will not save you, and all you can truly do is pump your cooldowns into her soulless body as your health is slowly siphoned. In reality, this only takes course over a second or two, but the amount of time this slow burn can repeat through one match or several has very clearly taken its toll on the community. It seems that nearly everything has fallen into place for this character to be hated. You might even say Kasumi is a near perfect storm of hatred. So like, is there anything good about her then? Something I've always been curious about is this simple question I'll ask now. Have you ever played Kasumi? Like, really played her. I myself have contemplated the balance of what's fun versus frustrating for years now. Eevee and Willow were once some of the most hated characters out there because of their mobility and high area damage respectively, whereas nowadays they could be seen as some of the least egregious specialists in those areas. What I'm trying to say is, in a player versus player game, for a character to be fun in a unique fashion, it will also inevitably end up being frustrating to an extent. So let's extend our disbelief for a bit and look at how perchance Kasumi could actually be fun. Nearly every character in the game has something in particular they specialize in, something that makes them both occasionally frustrating but also fun and unique. With how infamous Kasumi is, one of the biggest misconceptions I see thrown around is the only reason she's fun is because she is overpowered. Aside from that, she is completely brain dead and has little to no substance, similar to prevailing opinions of, say, Jigglypuff and Melee.
It's dirty because there's no risk involved.
As if I need to say it, this is obviously untrue. Well, aside from the overpowered part. I mean, I can't say it doesn't help. Kasumi is a character that ideally works in extremes. She has very little mobility, her movement speed is well below average, she either does no damage at all if out of range and not in line of sight, and what feels like unmatched power when she's ready and the enemy is in range. You could almost think of her like Arena's Dugtrio trap. Dugtrio's Arena Trap. Now, I haven't grinded Kasumi to level 100 or anything, but in my opinion the biggest thing that makes her so enjoyable at times is the same thing that crushes her opponent's morale so damn much. Having your opponent in a position where you know you're going to win and you know they can't escape is some of the most fun you can have in the entire game, and Kasumi's kit is based around that idea. It's a feeling that only comes around when you have mastered a character enough to where you can actually pull off being so dominant in a match consistently, but that of course can take some time, to say the least. Kasumi, even if she was not overpowered, would still reflect that feeling, where you can see what is going to happen, you can do the quick maths in your head, and you know your opponent will die and that you will prevail. In a sense, this securing of occasional dominant moments if you play her effectively is what this character was designed for. And although the sort of dominance we got in-game wasn't exactly what the developers had in mind, I can't deny that due to her overpowered state and her initial design, it has proven to be very, very fun indeed. On a more situational note, it appears that Paladin's growth has actually, well, grown a bit in the past vast chunk of time here. And as such, I've had the pleasure of seeing some old faces come up in the community again, people I know personally. More than a few times I've seen these friends of mine come back to the game piloting our infamous blue bedlam as a way to ease back into the game. I'm kind of aware this is merely a timely thing, but I do feel it's an important factor, as at some points in time, some older faces might have needed a character like Kasumi to exist. In my opinion, even if an overtuned character is unhealthy for the longevity of the game, seeing people I love pick the game back up due to it warms my heart just as much as it breaks it to see them being bullied for simply picking a character that seemed enjoyable, or even just relaxing in the moment. And this is kind of where I want to insert a little PSA of sorts. Even if you and I may groan when we see a level 70 Kasumi on the enemy team, they are of course still human. Maybe they just wanted to play the funny ghost girl, and then found she really clicked with them. Not to mention everyone has their own definition of fun. As a result, some people have fun by wanting to be optimal and picking the best characters. Even the desire to win is hardly an invalid definition of fun. Everyone wants to win, that's why we play the game. And even though it can be frustrating, always respect your fellow players, and respect the people behind the ghost. Or at the very least, respect the shit that they have to put up with these days in order to play her as much as they might. With that being said, this puts us with a character that, although has potential and is a lot of fun, is hated beyond belief, and will likely bring PTSD for years to come whether they become balanced or not. There was nothing to look back upon before she was broken. This was her first impression, and the impression was far from desirable for most players. There will now be a continual chunk of the player base that will illogically loathe the character no matter what, whether due to bad experiences or simply due to following the crowd. And make no mistake, the crowd is very, very menacing. So, that leads us to Kasumi's first real balance change. Let's talk about it. Although she received a few changes in the Dawnforge pass, nerfing her primary by nerfing its targeting range, as well as buffing her F ability slightly, these changes generally fell on deaf ears though, as I feel most would agree, for lack of a better word, they really didn't do much, if anything. However, in the following update, Emergence, her primary fire was altered to address the issue. The solution? To quote the patch notes, Yokai Doll, aka her primary, now requires a target before it can be fired. What the hell does that mean? In short, you are now required to click on your target to activate the ability. This means that if you were to hold the ability, unless you started holding it on the target itself, you would have to re-click the target to resume slicing and dicing, as well as re-clicking it again if you were to accidentally track off your target for any period of time. The general consensus for this change was quite positive. Finally, the brain-dead character was no longer as brain-dead, and Kasumi would get her just desserts. This is kind of where I wanted to reassert the question I asked later, but just in a different light. Have you played Kasumi since the change? To be blunt, the change makes the character infuriating to play. Now, I am playing it up a bit for the sake of dramatics, but I do honestly find it very annoying to use in game. Basically, the issue is you can be wailing on a guy, you miss once, and suddenly you just kind of stop. Oftentimes you won't even realize you've missed, so you just end up sitting there awkwardly till you do something about it, making many small moments where it's painfully easy to see how suboptimal you're being. You can't even flick shot like a normal semi-automatic gun or whatever. In editing this, I've also realized now just how difficult it is to capture what I'm talking about in gameplay itself. Just know that the annoyance is pretty small, but it happens just so often, it's really hard to disregard. I'll, I guess, try to get some footage of me failing to realize I'm missing shots, but yeah, just keep in mind it's a little hard to see. Now, I imagine a lot of people's response to that would be the quintessential get good, which I do get, honestly, like I really do. And I'll kind of address that mindset a bit later. But yeah, I'm not the best tracker in the world, for sure I can practice and get better. The bigger problem I have with it is it really doesn't fix the issue. Like, yeah, I could practice for 1,000,000 hours and become godlike at tracking. Or there's the much easier option of simply spamming your left mouse button or whatever to get this same damn result. It's just extra steps. It's just annoying. And keep in mind, they never even changed their damage or anything. It's the same thing, just more annoying for the Kasumi. And at the end of the day, even if I'm the best tracker in the world, at some point that 7 is going to hit his Q and I'm going to miss some shots. Or at some point I'm just going to miss in general because Paladins. It's annoying, and the paranoia that you have to react to your own misses, it'll make all matters more frustrating than they need to be. Ironically enough, spamming your left mouse button is just the most effective method, which is an even bigger problem for me personally since my family has hereditary issues with tendinitis. So basically all the change did was lock her potential that they never actually changed, by the way. They locked that behind a spammy and annoying way to play her that hurts my damn hands. As a result, this change changes absolutely nothing. It makes the game just as frustrating for people playing against Kasumi, and just way more annoying specifically for the pilot of the character. And everyone just kind of seems fine with it, I guess. Oh, did I mention that you can literally just revert the change if you want? Notice the gameplay I've been playing in the background for the entire video. Kasumi's primary is acting as though we're pre-patched the nerf. The thing is, this is post-patch. How did I do it? Well, That's where a little thing comes into play called auto hotkey.
That's right, we're gonna cheat.
Literally, all I did was steal some auto hotkey code that apparently makes a button press itself a random amount of times between two numbers while you hold down a key. I changed some stuff to where me holding down left click does a bunch of left clicks, and that's it. I'm playing post-patch left-click spamming Kasumi, aka pre-patch Kasumi, minus the hand pain. Buying items is a little weird, but I guess cheating's gotta cost somehow. The point I'm trying to make here is that this particular addressing the issue really didn't address the issue at all. It seemed more like a way to pander to the outrageously loud hatred Kasumi was already receiving, and the positive response that the change received told me that really, people don't care about balancing Kasumi, or at least not enough to fully think it through. From my perspective, all I see is the simple yet petty desire to make her suffer, per se. Or at the very least, as long as it was a nerf to Kasumi, it was a nerf worth existing no matter what. In a bit more of a wishy-washy gameplay design complaint, this change just also messes with what I talked about earlier in what I think is fun about her. Even if she was bad, but this change was reverted, you would still gain enjoyment from playing her via those small moments of dominance when you find those positions where Kasumi shines the most. This change removes that. Well, if you're not cheating like me, but yeah. Imagine if other characters who were hated at one point had the rug pulled out from under them in similar ways, specifically nerfing what makes the characters fun, rather than actually balancing the meta-relevant characters appropriately. Imagine Leon if she was nerfed to where her cooldowns couldn't be used in quick succession, disrupting her combos and her flow. Think of Maeve if her prowl was nerfed to where it wouldn't boost her jump height or aerial drift at all. Yagoroth if she took more damage the more health she had. Furia if her heal beam got subsequently weaker in healing as the match progressed. Oh wait. Vivian if her damage was lessened the longer she kept shooting her primary. Kinessa if she had insane damage fall off at mid-range. Drogos if he was rendered completely inert if the enemy team had any characters with any sort of hit scan. Oh wait. All these changes sound fine from the perspective of someone who doesn't play them and found these characters generally difficult to play against, but each change would nerf some of, if not the main reasons why people enjoy the characters to begin with, and that is basically what they did to Kasumi. So yeah, that's my wishy-washy take on the gameplay design part of her. As a result of the change, Kasumi becomes, gameplay-wise, just a slightly more annoying to pilot damage dealer, who will eventually get nerfed anyway. Vora had a change somewhat like the change that Kasumi had. Early after Vora's release, she was quite strong as well, and though the devs weren't certain by the next patch of how to nerf her appropriately, they made a small quality of life change, making the lockout period for Vora's alternate fire 0.5 seconds instead of the previous 0.8. It was a quick slapped-on change that still exists to this day, after appropriate nerfs were commenced on Vora at a later time. Kasumi's change gives me the same vibes, as though the devs felt it was just as inconsequential, but instead of that change being a quality of life for the character, it was more a quality of life for the community, a community that hated her and wanted to see her fall. And at this point in time, we know Kasumi nerfs are still incoming, and anyone playing Kasumi will simply have to deal with this annoying non-change alongside the nerfs that will hit, and will more than likely hit hard. At this point, you might be thinking something like, oh, try balancing the character yourself, idiot. If you think you're so smart, how would you balance it? Blah, blah, blah. In response to that, I don't know, bro, I make skin tier lists. Any opinion of mine would be an opinion of some non-competitive buffoon who just thinks infinite dodge rolls are hype and Vivian spam is funny. With that being said, here's my opinions on how to balance her. Opinion number 1, make her bad. I don't know, just like cut her damage in half or something. Make her just trash, mid-tier, bottom-tier garbage. If this was the play, instead of changing her primary attack's function itself like they did, she would be hot garbo and yet still would most likely retain the aspects that made her fun, ending up something like a Sky kind of character, trouncing new players and being a low-level menace. Honestly, it's been a damn while since we've had another character like that. I'm down. Previous other characters were dealt with similarly. Both Maeve and Vivian, like previously stated, had immensely strong releases to where they were intensely hated. They were both then subsequently nerfed to the damn ground, and eventually gained buffs over time to slowly sink back into being just another champion, aka the best possible scenario for an absolutely hated character. Those characters have over time become good again, and even meta threats at points, but never again would they become as close to being as dominant as their release. So like, just do that with Kasumi, I guess. Opinion number 2, make her bad, but just sometimes. I've always kind of liked how her curse stacks move so easily from one unkilled character to another, so I kind of thought, why not just expound upon that curse stacks idea thing. First off, make her at base quite bad, then increase her maximum curse stack count to like 10 or something, I don't know, and make her buffs per stack much lower. As a result, she could still be powerful and push her dominating playstyle, but it would reset after a kill. This could create an interesting balancing act kinda between trying to maintain the amount of stacks on multiple different enemies without actually actually killing them until needed to be as effective as possible. This way she would turn into much more of a micro momentum character. Kind of similar to Caspian, as he can build up his own stacks and snowball the entire team, but with Kasumi she would have to regain her stacks somehow after every kill to keep her dominating buffs and stuff. Basically this idea would keep her highs in a relatively similar place, but make it much harder to actually get to those highs, while having her neutral state before any curse stacks are built up to be straight up unsafe to be in. Opinion 3. I actually don't have a third opinion. This is just a placeholder, but I couldn't think of anything else, so I should just stick to skin tier list. Now, are these ideas bad? Yes. Why? Because I made them. But in my opinion, they also allow what's enjoyable about the character to still exist in a more controlled and less frustrating fashion. This video is kind of a mess, but I just kind of wanted to talk about it. Like, we have a character that's so absolutely loathed that if a change that literally doesn't serve any purpose except to make life more annoying for the pilot of the character comes around, we celebrate it. I wish I knew anyone who actually felt comfortable talking positively about Kasumi stuff and actually plays Kasumi a lot, because I only have a passing interest in her and I really don't play her a whole lot. I would like to know the thoughts of anyone who actually plays her. Is the change actually as annoying as I think? I would never be able to tell by listening to the community, since the thoughts of people that don't hate Kasumi are so damn drowned out, and hell, I'll even say stifled. I think people would rather actively dismiss Kasumi players or even do whatever they can to shut them up. I know the hatred can seem a bit trivial at times, but I'm not kidding when I say Kasumi is the most hated character in Paladins ever, which of course breeds a lot of toxicity against Kasumi players, which I honestly feel quite bad for, especially since, oh boy, alright, I'll say it. Kasumi, she's really not that bad. Okay, she's overtuned, yeah. She needs some adjustments, yeah, but she has like zero mobility. She's extremely stiff in her playstyle, intensely telegraphed. If you want to shut her down the easy way, just get your team to help out. Hell, I've done it myself plenty of times just by outskilling the Kasumi skill cap. Her primary at base has far and away some of the lowest DPS compared to all damages and flanks in the game, and it's hardly even close. It's only because of the auto aim that it feels damning. The actual damage itself is not good. It's really just a war of mentality. If she tilts you, you're done, since you've already given up at that point. With so many people saying she's beyond broken, it's easy to give up and just default to the feelings of, oh, she's impossible to deal with, it's unfair, f this game. It's not like dealing with her is easy, but it's doable. Don't listen to the community. Counterplay and all that. Take advantage of her lackluster damage and mobility. Surprise her. Get good. I guess that's kind of my response to the folks telling me to just get good, quote unquote, with Kasumi's new primary. Listen, I'll make a deal. I'll become the best tracker in the entire game to accommodate the obnoxious change with her primary if everyone else just, quote unquote, gets good and learns how to deal with the damn character instead of complaining about it on goddamn Twitter. What was my point in this anyway? I make skin tier lists. What is this video? My point with this video isn't to prove that Kasumi isn't busted. It's not even really to complain about the unneeded change, but more just to bring any sort of awareness to the effects of the hatred as a whole, and as an extension, the effects of hatred itself. Keep in mind that the hatred of a character, even if it's technically justified, can often cause people to overlook the well-being of people who played the said hated character. I know the community corroborating an annoying change isn't the worst thing, far from it, but just always keep in mind the other side of the coin. In this case, the other side of the coin would be the people who just want to play the character that just so happens to be disliked to an absolutely unholy degree. But yeah, this whole video, mess as it is just something I haven't heard talked about much, and I feel like it's a good point of discussion just to be brought up more. That's where I come in, I guess. The skins guy talking about Kasumi for some reason. I also want this video to serve as an encouragement of sorts. When it comes to Kasumi and overpowered characters, like, don't listen to the community unless it's actual counterplay advice. Kasumi is not the most powerful champion to ever exist. I can guarantee that. She is beatable no matter how annoying she is. Don't let her or the people complaining about her ruin your day. Don't give up. You can overcome the busted ass ghost. That's all. Hopefully this video was enjoyable. Maybe it helped you understand a bit more about Kasumi. I should really stick to skin tier list, huh? Okay, have a lovely day, afternoon, morning, whatever. Bye!